Good evening, everybody. So happy to have you in here. We I was very surprised by the numbers. We have over 100 people registered for tonight. Very excited about it. Obviously, it's a hot topic. House Bill 4401, what every investor needs to know. Yeah, this House bill was passed back in December, and it's going to affect the eviction moratorium and extensions there, and what you got to do before you can start trying to collect rent, and then also help establish the landlord compensation fund. So we're gonna get into that. Dan Hayes and I, of course, are your hosts. We have been doing this for next month will be a year that we've been running these webinars. We've had a lot of fun doing it and hopefully providing a lot of value. And perfect. All right, let's jump into it. I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to give you a quick agenda, introduction about myself, and then I'll let Dan give his little intro. I'm going to run over the quick market stats. Then Dan's going to jump in and talk about House Bill 4401. I'll talk about the real-time impact of that on current transactions. And then we will have some time for some Q&A. So, all right, my name is Benjamin. If you don't know me, if this is your first time here, my name is Benjamin Ficker. I'm a multifamily broker with Equity Pacific Real Estate. We help you maximize your portfolio, whether that's buying, selling, or exchanging. We're the go-to people for those transactions. I've been in real estate since 2004, which feels like just yesterday. Multifamily specifically since 2015. I've got an incredible wife since 2017. She's right there. She's wonderful. Such a great wife and such a great mother. I've been a dad for almost 2 years now, in April. Very excited. This is Max sitting in our car that we just bought. The first new car I've bought in about 10 years. So very excited about that. All right. Dan, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, Dan Hayes, one of the owners of Real Property Management Solutions here in Portland, Oregon. We manage just over 1,000 units, most all of that residential. Anything with Plex in its name and mid-market multifamily. I'm also an active real estate investor in the Portland market. So I'm in it as deep as you can be in it, if you will. And I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Perfect. All right. While I'm not sharing my screen, I just realized that I've got my stuff swapped here. So I'm going to keep looking. It's going to look like I'm keep looking down, but I don't want to do that. So let me rearrange my screen real quick. Here we go. And now we do that. Now I'm going to share my screen again, and that
There's
is wrong. Is that I think that's the wrong screen though. Let me fix that real quick. Let me go to second screen. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's supposed to be full screen, but doesn't matter. Okay. All right, so quick market stats. Again, we do everything multifamily from 2 units to 100 units, anywhere in between there. We finding good data on anything 5+ units is tough. So tonight, I'm just going to talk about some cherry-picked stats from the RMLS. So it's going to be pretty light on the apartment stuff, but I'm looking at some news sources for data on the bigger properties. So interesting numbers here. New listings since the beginning of the year. We've had 73 duplexes and triplexes listed in all 4 counties. 42 of those are already pending and 8 have already sold. New pending properties overall, right? Could have been listed before last year, but between January 1st and today, we've had 101 new duplex and triplex properties go pending, go under contract. At the same time frame for last year, before the pandemic started, we had 52, right? So now in a pandemic, we've got almost double that. It's I was very surprised at how, I mean, I know it's robust because I'm in the market daily, but that number just blew me away. New solds, we've already had 70 properties sell this year in 2 to 3 unit properties, and last year we had 57 in the same time frame. Fourplexes, 18 new fourplex come on the market so far this year. 8 of those are already pending. 1 has already sold. So 50% of the inventory is gone or has gone in the first 60 days or so. 20 overall new pending fourplexes this year. Last year it was 11. Again, twice as many. New sold fourplexes, there's 14 sold. That's an average of 195 a door. Last year there were 6 that sold at an average of 171 a door. New listings for 5 to 8 units. Again, this is a little thin because we're just going off the RMLS. 18 new listings in the RMLS, 8 already pending, 1 already sold. 20 overall properties have gone pending so far this year. The same time last year, 5 to 8 unit properties in MLS, there were 3. It's definitely going to be a much more active year than it was last year. Properties that have sold, 236 per door. 8 properties have sold, 236 per door. If you take out the 1 new construction property, that drops down to 169 per door, right? So that's probably much more in line with what people should expect if it's not a brand new construction property. Last year there were 7 sold. So what's my summary of the market? It's busy. We're very, very busy. We've got, I don't know, 4 properties we're bringing to market alone in the next 3 weeks. And I'm just one guy. There's just a bunch of activity out there. I talked about this late last fall, how what I think we're going to see is everybody who wanted to sell last year, as soon as the new year rolls around, they're going to start going on the market. And that's what we're seeing happen. And also, as many people as there are getting out of town, there's plenty of people to pick that stuff up. So don't let the idea that everyone's selling stop you from selling, because there's still incredible demand at the moment. We need supply. I'm going to talk specifically about Washington County because that's where most of my people are looking right now. But the reality is there's properties that are pending, and then there's properties that are probably overpriced, right? That's what we have in this market. Most reasonably priced properties are seeing multiple offers fairly quickly. We obviously want to stretch and get as much as you can out of it, but the reality is, in multifamily properties sell based on their incomes, and people are still buying those incomes, even if it's not that much income. In Washington County, there is 1 active property in Washington County that is 4+ units, and I should say 2 because literally 10 minutes ago, another one just came up on the market. So there's 2 in Washington County currently on the market. LoopNet, and the one that was there before the one that just came on the market yesterday. So before then, for about 2 weeks, there was nothing new on the market in Washington County. LoopNet shows 5 properties in Washington County that's 4 or more units. 2 of those are under contract. The 2 that are available are over 4.3 million, and the last one's in Gaston, right? So take that for what it's worth. But if you live in Hillsborough or Beaverton or Tigard, any of those areas of Washington County, there's no competition. It would be, if you're thinking of selling, that right now might be a time to go because you've got nobody to compete with. I skipped ahead. Okay, that is the anecdotal quick market stat update. I'm going to pass it over to Dan, and then we're going to talk about 4401. Then I'm going to come back and talk about the real-time impact of the eviction moratorium extension. So Dan, here you go. It's all you.
All right, beautiful. Can you see my screen, Ben?
Yes, I should unmute and then answer. Yes, I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay. All right, gang. Listen, we really appreciate your time. I'm going to spin through this pretty quickly in the upfront, and I do want to spend just a few minutes on the impact of on the rental market from the pandemic. I think as professionals in the industry, it's important for us to make sure that we spend a little bit of time talking about how 2020 finished up and what are some of the implications to that as you think about your investments. But we will absolutely spend the vast majority of our time on 4401. A lot has become clear. A lot's actually happened in the last week or so. And so let's see if we can't boil this thing down into a digestible size to consume, if you will. Okay, again, not intended to be legal advice. I believe my information is accurate, but I don't guarantee it. I'll show you my sources. Please, 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 if you have a sticky situation, do what I do, get yourself a really good attorney. The penalties here in this space are pretty high, and the trap doors and the pitfalls are numerous. Almost feels like it's done intentionally. I don't believe that's the case, but there are a lot of pitfalls here with House Bill 4401. Lots of places to trip up. So please get legal advice when you have any sticky situation. This is the word version of everything I've said so far. Just very quickly about us, we have a number of years of property management experience. We are rental properties as well as property managers, so we consider ourselves to be landlords that serve landlords. We are a family-owned and operated company, and it's all we do. Ben is responsible for all of the brokerage stuff. Our job is to manage the rental properties, and we go from single family to multifamily, just the same space that Ben operates in. We operate in all 4 counties, mostly Newburgh and Yamhill, and then really anything from Troutdale to Cornelius down into Newburgh and all points in between. And you can see some of the examples of the properties we represent. Okay, Ben, why don't you, again, I'm not sure I heard it, but how do people submit questions along the way? I don't know that we covered that. Yeah.
Yep, we did not talk about that. So if you're looking at the control panel when you log in, or when you join the webinar, there should be a spot that says questions. Oh, looks like a couple of people have already found it. Under the questions tab, that's where you're going to put them in there. Don't put them in the chat window because we don't see that. Go to the questions, and we will answer those either real time or at the end when we do a little Q&A.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. All right, let's talk about the rental market update. Lots happened. Let's take a look at the national cut. What most people don't know is that the vast majority of the rent decline that happened nationally went from March to June. When we started the year, it was pretty normal. You know, the normal uptick as the season started to get busy. That's what we saw nationally. And then, of course, mid-March happened. Shelter-in-place orders across the country. People stopped moving. Obviously, landlords take the vast majority of our rent increases during turnovers. Not a lot of turnovers happening as people couldn't move, and we saw pretty significant rent decline from March to June. Nationally, since June, we've seen a fairly normal increase as we headed into those summer months in 2020, and then the normal decline as we headed into the fall months. And we finished the year nationally just around 1.5% below prior year. Pretty big difference from what the previous 2 years were. Now, inside that number are some very interesting things. If you think about where you may want to place your bets moving forward, one of the things you may want to consider is what's happening in these pricey coastal superstar cities, sometimes called gateway cities. San Francisco hit hardest. 2 bedrooms alone, 2020 since March, down almost 27%. Seattle, not far behind. These expensive cities, as we've read, really got hammered as it relates to rents year over year for 2020. So one of the other things that's interesting is we had a number of cities that had double-digit increases of rent declines. Now, with that, though, comes the other side of it, and that's the opportunity. We had a number of cities that showed significant rent increases over prior year. In fact, Boise, Ben and I were talking about Boise 2 years ago, and we thought maybe we missed the window in Boise, but the pandemic has really sparked that market again, as well as markets like Toledo and Fresno that you might not think about. And what's happening is everything that we've read, that people in these pricey cities are now working from home and they're looking to move to more affordable and perhaps more peaceful cities. But here's the trend that I think is really interesting and something we should think about both nationally and in a minute you'll see thinking about it locally. What we're starting to see as an emerging trend is not just a jettison of living in urban areas and going anywhere you want to work from home. What we're actually seeing is what I call adjacent cities or looking to do an adjacency move. And that to me means we're finding folks that are moving a distance away from that hub city, but not so far away that you couldn't commute a couple of times a month or maybe once a week. Think 90 minutes from the city. And that's what we're starting to see. San Francisco, hammered. Seattle, hammered. But what we're finding is communities that might be an hour, hour and a half away from those cities are seeing significant rent increases as well. And I actually think that's one of the more permanent trends to the pandemic that you may want to think about as you think about your investments. Locally, very much the same story. Huge declines in Portland, down 7%. Several months in a row, we saw rent decreases, starting to feel like it's maybe evening out. But when we started the year in 2020, we thought rents would finish between 2 and 2.5%. And in fact, not so much, obviously, down 7%. Oregon mirrored the national trend. So how is that? Well, let's take a look at what's going on in the suburbs around Portland. Just like that national cut, think about the cities that we're seeing significant rent increases. Bend, Salem, Eugene. Heck, even Hillsborough, Beaverton, and Lake Oswego are flat to slightly up versus prior year in 2020. It's a pretty long commute to Portland from Bend, but if you've got a nice place to live, a peaceful place to live, and a fairly affordable place to live, you can make a trip over the mountain a couple of times a month if need be. And that's what we're seeing. And that, I think, is something that is super important to remember. This just out from the Census Bureau, we are seeing vacancy rates tick up slightly. In fact, in the West, up 4.7 from 4.4 in the fourth quarter. One of the interesting things is Portland is now number 18 with vacancy rates. It was around 15 last quarter. The biggest impact in our market is actually Seattle. I think Seattle was 7th in the third quarter. It's now 16th in terms of vacancy rate. So we're really starting to see now these metro markets, not only are rents declining there in 2020, we're starting to see the impact on vacancy rates as well. So think about that. Lots of activity outside of Portland, and vacancy rates are pretty low in those suburb markets. So I think that the impact that is important to think about here is, I would not think that stay at home is or work from home is a black and white thing. I think there's a version of it that will be here to stay, and I think demand will shift with that. But in our company, 25, 30 employees, we've been working remotely long enough now that we've learned how to do it well, but we've also learned some of the things that aren't beneficial about working from home. So we will take an approach that's very much a hybrid. So I wouldn't think that other companies are going to be that much different. So I don't believe that we're all going to be working from home permanently. I think it'll be somewhere in between. The other thing that's pretty significant is the amenities that renters value. And this is really where, if you've got a property where perhaps you think things are not going as well and you're not quite sure what renters may want, think about some of the big impacts here. Number one, pet ownership in the United States. In 2017, survey by the Humane Society reported that 68% of the households in the US reported having a household pet. Pet ownership in the United States increased by 20% in 2020. That's one of the biggest impacts of the pandemic. In fact, a strict no pet policy, frankly, in our market, I don't think works, especially now. The other thing that's super important to remember is that what people value has changed. Anything that we do now as landlords that force people out of their home for whatever reason is not going to be looked upon favorably. Think in-unit washers and dryers. Okay. Think also about space to work from home. If you've got space that isn't the kitchen table or a corner of the bedroom to work from home, and it really can be pretty small, if you can call out or even make some adjustments to really show that that space is conducive to working from home, you really are at the top of the desirability list. And then finally, getting away from the work day is different now than it once was. A lot of times it's going to the backyard or out on the deck to get away from the workday. So anything that you can do there to create that space is super important. I've actually made some adjustments to my build to handle all three of those. Urban areas are going to vary from neighborhood to neighborhood for a while, but I
Dan,
wouldn't give up on those
sorry,
urban areas.
real
Yeah,
real
yeah,
quick. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. We actually had a question. I was going to wait on it because you mentioned it.
yeah.
Sheena asked, "Hey Dan, since you're an investor in the Portland market, have you made big investment changes based on the new moratorium and zoning changes?" Right. So,
Yeah.
not specifically towards that, but that speaks about that question right there.
Yeah. So my own personal approach, I am not making any changes based on the moratoriums or any other legislative work. Don't know if you know this, but if you haven't looked at HB 330, do. That is a much better approach around relief for landlords. There's also a bill now that's out there that it looks to eliminate all no-cause evictions. So in Oregon, as you know, you can end the tenancy without cause in the first year. That's on the table to be taken away. My point is this: that stuff's going to happen. If you're in it for the long haul, we can work through that. What we really have to pay attention to is where the money is going. And to me, downtown Portland and other areas like it are a long way from any kind of recovery. But I believe that we will be able to handle the challenges that are a little bit further out. And so I'm staying in Portland, but I'm not in close to downtown. And I'm investing in space outside that is private. I also am creating spaces for people to work from home. That means obviously the space itself, but also the technology that you can connect to make it absolutely just like a home office, even though it may not be its own separate space. So hopefully that answers that question.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Vacancy rates, rent collection very quickly. This is 2020, May through November. About 13% of the Oregonian renters in Oregon were unable to pay rent, either full or partial. You can see what happened in Portland. January, a little bit better in Oregon, about the same in Portland. Class C, obviously, workforce housing hit the hardest, about 16%. Okay, we're starting to see Class A market rate apartments now have a higher vacancy rate on top of an ability to pay, and that really speaks to people leaving that Class A market space like the Pearl, like downtown, and other luxury apartment complexes, perhaps for a place that might be a bit more affordable and a little bit more peaceful, if you will. So here's the thing about rent collection. I didn't add a bunch of my slides here. I took some of those out, but I want you to know a couple of things. We are doing about half as we are twice as good on rent collection as the net average. We're around 7% typically. January was actually 5% delinquent for us, so we felt really good about that. The thing that is interesting though is that most tenants are tapping into resources to pay rent. In fact, large sums are owed by a small amount of people. For us, 80% of the outstanding balance of rent that came due and not paid between April and today, 80% of that number, about $500,000, held by less than 4% of the units. A very small number of units owe a really big amount. So make sure your documentation is sound. If you're going to tap into the landlord compensation fund, great, but you may not be prioritized and you may not get any funding. So make sure your documentation is in good shape, because it's it's unlikely that these folks that hold such a large amount are actually going to be able to pay. All right, let's dig into the moratorium update. There really now are 5 things that we really should be worried about. 2 of which are largely over. The City of Portland expanding the relocation requirement for rent increases. That was any rent increase effective prior to March 1. If it was any rent increase prior to March 1 and the tenant requested it, you'd have to pay. That's off the table now, obviously, with the number of days notice requirement, et cetera, et cetera. Multnomah County, of course, we know, extended their eviction moratorium, but they rescinded that extension on January 14th, so that they would align with House Bill 4401 effective February 1. I bring this up because if the word has not gotten to any of the tenants that you may be dealing with, who may be telling you, you can't evict me because of Multnomah County or the City of Portland, just know that that's not true. We're all now aligned with House Bill 4401. okay, across the state. Now, the CDC is in place, and it's been extended by the Biden administration until March 31st. Okay, but because 4401 does have stronger rent control, or excuse me, tenant protection, the CDC will not apply in those situations. But keep your ear to the ground. The $1.9 trillion bill that the Biden administration is looking to pass has language in it that would extend the CDC moratorium until September. Now, the CDC moratorium has a lot of requirements, forms that are, penalty under perjury. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would just keep your ear to the ground. What we really want to worry about is House Bill 4401, and that's what we'll talk about next. So how it works is 4213 expired, 4401 picked it up and moved the emergency period to December 31st of 2020. Okay, so we are officially, under some conditions, some circumstances, over with the emergency period. We're now in the grace period. Okay, but remember that CDC moratorium is still there. On January 14th, as it said, Multnomah County and the city of Portland aligned, and we are aligned now with 4401 and in the middle of the grace period if your tenants have not submitted a declaration form. And that's what I want to talk about next. It is true that if your tenants that owe you rent from April 1 to December 31st, 2020, if they've not submitted a declaration form, their emergency period is over and they are in the grace period for the balance owing between April 1 and December 31st. And that's really the first headline. If you've received a declaration form or if you've not received a declaration form is the first filter to determine whether or not you're in an emergency period or not. Okay, so if your tenants have not submitted a declaration form that they've had a hardship, your emergency period is over, and we are now on the up to the last month of the grace period. That means, and I'll talk about this in a moment, if your tenants have not paid rent in January or February and they have not submitted a declaration form, they are not protected by House Bill 4401. Now, if your tenants have submitted a declaration form or you've taken action that would trigger a declaration form, which I'll talk about in a minute, you are in an emergency period and an extended grace period. In fact, both the emergency period and the grace period has been extended to June 30th of 2021 if you've received a declaration form. Okay, so that's really the two things. Declaration form, no. Emergency period is over. You're in the grace period. Declaration form, yes. Eviction moratorium, emergency period, grace period has now been extended to June 30th. And really, the way it works is you are largely prevented from terminating a tenancy without cause or for non-payment until July 1. And here's why. There are so many ways for the declaration form to be triggered. I've talked about the first one. The tenant can send you a declaration form, but you as a landlord could also trigger an extension. In fact, if you fail to include what's called a House Bill 4401 notice and this newly required House Bill 4401 declaration form with your balance reminder statement that you issued before the grace period, or you've terminated tenancy for non-payment and you deliver that before June 30th or served an eviction summons, if you don't send that House Bill 4401 notice and the declaration form with these notices, you automatically trigger an extension. Let me give you an example. For those that have been on the call with me before, you know I have this unit over on North Vancouver Avenue. The tenants have not paid since April 1 to December 31st. I've not received a declaration form from them. Okay, so they are officially in their grace period. It's about $23,000. That $23,000 is due to me by March 31st, 2021, according to House Bill 4401. Now, they haven't paid January and they haven't paid February either. If I send them a notice to terminate for non-payment of rent for January, I have to include a House Bill 4401 notice and a House Bill 4401 declaration form with that termination notice. If I don't, I automatically extend everything to June 30th of 2021. As an example, hopefully that makes sense to folks. In fact, one of the things that you may want to consider, and I'm talking to a lot of folks about this, it's a lot to keep track of. If you're like me with 30 units and another 1,000 units to manage, it's a lot to keep track of. So one of the things that you may want to consider, because the penalties are so high, and again, you need to do what's right for your business, but you may want to just get your head wrapped around that it's just going to be extended to June 30th of 2021, and just keep track of what's owed, enforce your lease, et cetera, et cetera. Submit for the landlord compensation fund if that's right for you, but just really count on that money being owed and your emergency period extended to June 30th, okay? Just because it's so easy to trigger this declaration form. So I'm going to figure out, Ben, how to reduce this thing here so I can see this. Okay, there we go. So a little bit of a summary around when can I? Well, as I said, there's the first filter. Did a declaration form get submitted or not? So if you want to terminate for no reason, because you've got a tenancy that's less than a year old, you really cannot do that until July 1, okay? That's just a fact, declaration form or not. So you just know you cannot terminate for no cause until July 1. Now, and the reason it says and August 31 is because if your anniversary date fell during this period of April 1 to July 1, you can add 30 days, or your anniversary date is actually going to be 30 days past the end of the termination, or excuse me, the emergency period. Let me say that again. Imagine I have an 11-month lease with Ben Ficker. Ben signed in April. His 11-month lease ends in March. Well, I may want to end Ben's tenancy for no cause under Chapter 90. I normally can do that because Ben's not lived in the property for a year or more. But I can't issue a no cause notice to vacate because of House Bill 4401. What do I do? Well, we're going to take Ben's anniversary date and we're going to extend it to a period that's 30 days beyond the end of the emergency period, which is August 31st. So what I would do is I would terminate Ben's tenancy between July 1 and August 31 because his anniversary date has been extended. You can terminate for cause other than non-payment. You can do that now. In fact, you should. Your lease violations should be enforced. In fact, document those. You'll need those later down the road. So you can terminate for cause. In fact, we've done a couple since then. You can also move back in or accept an offer from a buyer for that unit and terminate under 90.427. You can also terminate for 90.427 around demolishing, converting use, or repairs and renovations. Now, if you are someone who assesses late fees, if a declaration form has not been submitted, you can start submitting, you can issue late fees starting January 1. If you've received a declaration form, you're going to have to wait until July 1. Same thing for termination for any other cause. A no cause, in, as we said, 90.427. You can terminate for non-payment of current periods. So that basically means, look, I can terminate the tenancy of that unit for January and February, okay, because they haven't submitted a declaration form. But as soon as they submit one, we kick that to July 1. You can terminate for the non-payment of the non-payment balance. So that unit that I talked about, April 1 to December 31st, if I have not received a declaration form and I've not received any of that rent, I can terminate for that balance starting April 1 because the grace period's over. As soon as I get a declaration form, it all gets kicked to July 1. If I want to report their non-payment balance to a credit agency, I have to wait until April 1. So that debt from April 1 to December 31st, if I've not received a declaration form, I can also report that debt to a credit reporting agency starting April 1. If I receive a declaration form, you guessed it, it gets kicked to July 1. And then any other action to collect a non-payment balance, same thing. No declaration form, can't do anything until April 1. If you see, as soon as you receive one, you kick it to July 1. Ben, do we
So
have any
Dan,
questions on that?
not on that. I've got a question. Just I want to clarify. So your example on North Vancouver, if you haven't been giving them those notices, March 31st comes around, they owe you that money. You give them that notice of non-payment on April 1st with the notice that if they give you the declaration, right? So they could just easily respond to that and get that extra couple of months.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And
that's why.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that's why, it may be worthwhile to just go, look, I'm going to save myself that trouble. I'm just going to manage this best I can until June 30th. And I'm not asking anybody to lower their standards, but I've thought about what I want to do there. Do I want to poke this thing or leave them alone and see what happens?
Right.
But I'm convinced that we will not get those dollars with that.
The only other thing I was going to mention, terminate for any other no cause. Keep in mind, if it's something that somebody's going to own or occupy, that has still been allowed, regardless of declarations, anything like that. So
right,
that's basically the one you can do, right?
That's right. That's right. Yep. Okay. So hopefully that summary is helpful, kind of boils it all down into this one-page placemat, if you will, and hopefully that makes sense to you all. All right, so let's talk about this application. All right. First of all, it's open. The Landlord Compensation Fund is now open. You can apply. It's been extended. This first tranche has been extended to March 5th. It's my understanding that $50 million is what's going to be available for the first round. So between now and March 5th, you can apply for your situation and access to those compensation funds. It'll then close, they'll assess everything, and then open it back up as I understand it. But you can only do this after you receive the declaration form. And you as the property owner really do need to initiate the application. If you have a property manager, now the property manager can submit the application on your behalf. The problem is that every application has to have a distinct email and phone number. So imagine us, 1,000 units, a couple hundred property owners in the situation. We would have to find a way to have 200 separate emails, 200 separate phone numbers in order to apply on behalf of the owner. So we're going to supply the information to the property owner and assist, but they really should be the ones to initiate the application because of the way in which the portal works. You also have to provide notice to the tenants that have past due rent to let them know that there's an opportunity to have their past due rent covered. It's called a building notice. Now, initially we thought that the building notice had to go out to the whole building. So again, I've got 5 units on that property. I've got 1 unit that is owing us money. Initially, it came out and it looked like we would have to send this notice to all 5 units, and that's not the case. That's a recent addition to the FAQ for the OHCS website. You only need to provide this building notice to the affected tenants. So I need to provide the notice to the tenants. It's a building notice that says, hey, your landlord's applied for rent relief. You may have your rent forgiven. Pay attention and stand by. You've got to provide that and attest that you provided that, and you need a declaration form from the tenant. You then create an account online through this website here, and you begin the application. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that you need, okay? You can designate, as I said, an agent to assist and fill out the information, but just know that there's some information that the agent likely is not going to be able to provide, like that contact information. Be prepared to provide your W-9 for ownership verification and a way to get that electronic payment if that's what you choose. You're going to need to add tenant data. all right? And there's a rent roll template that you'll need to fill out. It's also on the OHCS website. You're going to need to provide all tenant information under ownership, regardless of whether they're delinquent or their their declaration status. So for my 30 units, I've got 2 units that are behind. One's a commercial, that one's out. I've got 1 unit that's very far behind. Everybody else is basically current. I have to provide a rent roll using the rent roll template for every one of those units with all the amount of rent that I'm paid and who's delinquent. And I've got to show them what my impact is. And then they've got this grid. If you haven't seen it, there's a grid that basically will put a point value on my situation. And the lower the point value, the lower in the priority list I'm going to be. And that's how that will work. You'll have to upload all your declaration forms and some details to the compensation request, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So if you haven't applied yet, be prepared to provide this information or you'll just have to stop and come back. Okay. Now, when Ben sends out this presentation, each one of these icons has a link to the information that you need for that specific thing. So in other words, if you want to watch a video, they've created a video for the full application process. When you get this presentation, just click on it, it'll take you there, or I've included the link up above. Just copy and paste that in your browser and you'll be able to go there. Same thing with in the instructions. This rent roll template is pretty comprehensive, and so much so that they've created a rent roll video, all right? And then a program web page. So it's open now. It's been extended as of today until 4 p.m. on Friday, March 5th. So if you haven't applied, this is what you're going to be needing to do. Some additional thoughts here real quick. Lots of complexity, so please make sure you do your own due diligence. There are some other changes and implications that I think are super important. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list. Number one, there's some prohibition on civil cases. So in other words, any action to recover payment before the end of the grace period is a problem. Okay, so you're just going to have to wait. New balance reminder requirements. You can still submit a balance reminder, but you've got to use the forms that have the new language. So get some help here, like Multifamily Northwest, okay? This balance reminder needs to state that the grace period has been extended to March 31st. It must include that House Bill 4401 notice and the House Bill 4401 declaration. If the emergency period extended via declaration, your new balance reminder has to have the new grace period that you have, right? So if you send one out today, they send you a declaration form. The next one you send out has to have the new grace period. If you send out a non-payment termination notice, like that property on North Vancouver Avenue, if I send out a termination notice for non-payment for January and February, it's not a 72-hour pay or quit. It's now 10 days to pay or quit, regardless of declaration form. And if you evict, provide a summons, a complaint form, get new forms, because you have to have this notice and the declaration, HB 4401 declaration included in those forms as well. Okay. The penalties are pretty steep, 3 months, 3 times monthly rent, right off the top. Any actual damages and injunctive relief on the eviction for the tenant. And then any attorney fees, unless you can establish that you didn't know that they submitted a declaration form. And by the way, you got to stop the action as soon as you know that you've got a form there. Okay. Remember also that 4401 changed the way in which your application of rent payment is to be applied. It's different than Chapter 90 that we've been living with for so long. It's basically current rent, past rent, and everything else. So be aware of that. Consult your legal counsel for any type of termination notice. Remember, security deposits can be used for non-payment balance on former tenants. And by the way, if you have somebody that owes you money and they're former tenants, you're not going to be able to access any of the compensation fund. So if the tenants on North Vancouver Avenue left, I can't get, if they would have left, I would not be able to submit for their funding. It's only for current tenants. I can include it in the rent roll, so I would get credit for the debt, but I wouldn't be able to get any funding for the debt. Someone will have to explain that to me later. You should cease any collection efforts until grace period's expired, even for your previous tenants. And then again, that 3-day termination. And that's a quick spin in 30 minutes or so of what's happening there. Again, this is who we are, and we're happy to help. Ben, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And I
Perfect.
do that by, tell me again.
I just take it. That's what I do.
You're going to do it, right?
There we go. Yep. All right. Now I guessed. All right. Let's talk about what this is actually, the implications of all of this in actual transactions that we've seen going on. So we've been dealing with a couple of different deals where there are tenants who are not paying. Not sure if you're aware or not, but once you get in the commercial financing world, there's like a 95, you have to be collecting 95% of that rent due to COVID, right? So if you've got a 14-unit building and 2 of them are missing rent due to COVID, you can't get commercial financing on it, right? So what you've got to do is develop a game plan for your non-paying tenants. That could be, forgiving that rent and so you can't just forgive it though, because it needs to show on your ledger of rent payments made, right? So if you're selling a building and you've got tenants who are not paying, you need to have something showing that they are paying, right? So that might mean Joe Blow writes a check to Joe Blow's property manager on behalf of those tenants for those rents, and then you collect your proceeds after all expenses and all of that, right? That way the next buyer can get commercial financing. We're working on a deal right now where it's an 8-unit, 1 tenant is not paying, and that seller is going to guarantee the rent through the eviction moratorium. Now, not every lender will agree to that as a stipulation, but we found 2 that will use that to get the loan through. So that is an option as well. We don't quite know how the landlord compensation fund is going to reflect on the ledgers, like Dan said, in terms of what a lender will see when they're then trying to get financing on it if you're selling the building. But if you're looking to collect money from this landlord compensation fund, you got to do it now. You got to get that process going. The sooner you get in there, just the better it's going to be, and you can stay up on top of it. Again, Dan and I talk about documentation all the time. Have all of your past due rent documented, right? You cannot expect to sell your property to a new investor and not have all of that stuff in hand to hand over to them for somebody to try to collect those funds later on. And of course, have declarations from all of your tenants available in your seller's package when you go to sell that property for that next buyer, if in fact you've collected those declarations.
Ben, and I would add to that, if a property manager is in place, make sure that property manager understands fully what's expected, because if you sell it and somebody else is managing it, and then that money comes in, like, have a way to talk about that, have a way to document that. We've got 2 situations right now where we really need the seller to tell us exactly what was agreed upon, so that and if we stay honest with the property manager, we know where that money's supposed to go and how it's supposed to go.
Absolutely. On the landlord compensation fund, if you are going to utilize it, finish your application tonight. Get in there and get it done, and also don't count on it, right? This fund seems to be really set up for the person who has 1 or 2 single-family homes with people not paying. But the more units you have, the less likely you are you'll qualify, but the less of a priority you are for them to get done. So if that's why I say you want to get your application done soon, because if there's a lot of people dragging their feet, you might squeak in this time, and next time all the single family home investors might might apply, and then you will be further down priority list and not get any money, right? So get it done, get it in there early, and just stay on top of it. Hey, actually, Dan, this is a great question. I don't know if you know this. Let's say you apply in February, you qualify, but you're just not in the priority to get that first $50 million. When you apply for the next one, do you reapply, or do you just update your application with the new amount of missed rent?
So I haven't filled my application out yet because I was really hoping I would be able to do that before today's class so that I could talk to that. But we believe that it's going to be just an update, but I don't know that definitively. So more news on that. And once I do the application, Ben, because I'm not gonna get any funding. I'll just tell you that right now. So, but I'm gonna do it just because I want to see. I'll send you notes so you can send it out to the group.
Perfect. That would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, we've got time for, well, let me run through the questions we've got in here already. And then we've just got a little bit of stuff to clean up at the end here. So Eric asks, if a person sells in Portland, will they need to find an out-of-town 1031 replacement? You'll need to find an out-of-town 1031 replacement if you don't want to stay in Portland.
Some would say yes.
I'm still a fan of Portland. We've got our rental in Portland. We're not getting rid of it anytime soon. 10 years down the road, I think people are going to be happy they own real estate in Portland. You just have to know that your entire business not model, but the structure of your business, like your workflows, your processes, all of that is changing and will continue to change down the road. There's a bill going. I don't know if it's up for vote or where it's at, being proposed or whatever. Right now, it's aimed at mobile home parks, but I see zero reason why it wouldn't get expanded to every investor. The gist of it is that you cannot raise, that they're going to try to cap how much you can raise rents even on turnover, right? So if you've got a fourplex at $1,000 a unit and they should be $2,000 a unit, one of those goes vacant, this new rule would stop you from going for that 2,000. They would cap you to a slight percentage above everybody else, right? I don't know. Right now that's geared towards mobile home parks. I don't know that it would expand to everyone else. I don't see why it wouldn't because of how things have been going. But that's the kind of thing that you just have to be prepared for if you're going to stay in this market. If you're not going to stay in this market, Idaho's great. Texas is great. We're closing
Utah's
on
great.
Utah's great. We're closing on 4 fourplexes for a client in about 2 weeks down in Texas, all brand new construction, going to get great rents. They probably need to add some insulation for the weather, but other than that, this thing's going to be ready to go. So I hope that
It's not the city of Portland. Honestly, I know the city of Portland is a big pain in everybody's rear end.
Yeah.
Most people think they call it Multnomah County, but Multnomah County has really nothing to do with it. It's the city of Portland.
Yeah.
But this stuff that's coming at us is statewide.
Yep. I think the person who's proposing this bill, I don't even remember the city she was from, but it wasn't one that I'd heard of, right? Yeah. Meaning it's a very small, out of the area place. But all right, Benjamin, how are you, Ben? Good to see you here. What are the types of renovations you generally terminate for? Roof replacement, window replacement, bathroom remodel, kitchen remodel, repipe, or replacing sewer lines? My short answer is going to be it's all about habitability, right? If you're just upgrading for the sake of upgrading, I don't know, like if somebody fought you on that, I don't know if that's going to pass muster, right? I don't know a lot of precedent being set in the courts right now about all of this stuff. But I can't imagine if like, hey, I just want to upgrade everything. I can't imagine that's going to fly. If it's, you literally cannot live there because it's in such disarray, that might be different. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I can tell you that there are tenant attorneys that have a keen eye out for that. So if you're trying to skirt that, boy, I would tread very, very carefully. In fact, I will go a couple of steps further than what Ben just said. The city of Portland is a great place to start because they have published 25 habitability requirements that landlords must meet. Chapter 90 has some too. Start there, but then ask yourself the question, because this is what a judge is going to ask you: how severe and for how long? And a roof replacement is probably not severe enough, honestly, unless it's just flat out unsafe.
Right.
Can they truly not live there, and for how long? And if you feel like any reasonable judge would go, yeah, that passes muster, you probably will be okay.
Yeah, perfect. Christine asks, to clarify, if rent is late from March, can I assess a late fee?
No, because it's the grace period. April 1, you can assess a late fee.
Got it. If I send a payment receipt, do I need to send a declaration form if they haven't signed the receipt?
If you send a payment receipt, do you need to send a declaration form? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Here's when you need to submit. There are two things, gang, that you need to submit. Anytime you submit a non-payment, a balance owing statement, a notice of termination for non-payment, an eviction summons, anything like that, you must include two things. One is the House Bill 4401 notice and House Bill 4401 declaration form. And the reason I keep saying House Bill 4401 is because 4401 states that a landlord must submit those things in substantially the same format as what's in the bill. Now, that declaration form coming back to you, you really cannot challenge its validity. You can't ask for more information. You can't challenge the way it's being delivered to you. If it's an email, a picture, wrapped around a rock and thrown through your front window, if you get it, you got it. So
is there a time frame that they have to respond with that declaration? Like if you say, hey, here's your eviction paperwork with your declaration notices. I mean, at what point? I mean, do they show up to that first appearance and give you the declaration form, or is there like a certain time frame?
No, they don't have a time frame. There's no like. I've initiated action with this tenant on North Vancouver Avenue. We have not seen a declaration form yet, and they literally could wait till whenever. But yeah, there's no time frame.
Got it. Okay.
But but why would there be, right? I mean, yes, if they really want to make my life miserable, they can cause me heartache. But if they don't submit it, I'm going to evict for January and February, and I'll be successful.
Right.
So at some point in time, I'm going to get it. But I'm a little peeved that I haven't gotten it yet, because I'd like to apply before March 5th just to see what happens.
Right. That feeds right in this great question from Ben right after that. Where do you seeing? Where do you get the best forms? Right. Who's got the most up to date? Multifamily Northwest. I haven't used the Rental Housing Alliance stuff, but I've heard that they're great as well. I just know Multifamily Northwest is so on top of it. There's a guy on Facebook the other day asking for where to find the free forms because Stevens Ness is going out of business. And I was like, you have got to stop looking for free forms, man. Pay the $5, get the form, make sure you're in compliance.
It makes no sense to me. If an entity provides you with a form and charges you $5 for it, and that form's wrong, who do you think holds that accountability?
Well, probably not Stevens Ness, I'm guessing.
Probably not Stevens Ness. Yeah. Multifamily Northwest is. Look, we're members of both Multifamily Northwest and RHA of Oregon, both very fine organizations. We use Multifamily Northwest because they're geared towards operators like us. We do tenant tech and all that other stuff. So, but they really have the most rock solid forms for sure.
Perfect. Sheena asks, will the date on the declaration form make a difference? If they haven't paid from April up until now, what date would they put when they sign? I'm guessing it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, as long as it's not future dated, I'm sure they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think maybe is okay. Look, maybe send a declaration form that says I'm going to be impacted in May.
Yeah.
I suppose they could do that, but I don't think they will. Like I have received a declaration form from a unit, but they're completely current. So I don't know what that means other than they're hedging their bet, or I don't know. But They just sent it to us.
Yeah.
So I've got a declaration form for one of those units. So hopefully Sheena that answers, but I don't think it would matter.
Okay. Sheena followed up with a question that I think will just take a sec to clarify. She asked, if you have 10 units, should you declare them all or just a few so that you'll more likely have a chance? So the declaration.
No, they've worked through that. They've worked through that.
Yeah. So the declaration is for the people who are not paying, right? So
Yeah.
you don't, there's a little bit of confusion when all this started that Dan touched on, where if you were applying for the landlord compensation fund, they wanted you to give a notice to the whole building, right? And that obviously, if you thought about it for 2 seconds, would lead a lot of people to think, oh, great, well, they're getting money, I don't need to pay, right? And cause even more delinquencies, right? So they've clarified that you only need to give those notices to the people that you need to collect from, right? So that declaration form is coming from the people who have not paid. And then when you go to apply, you're putting your whole rent roll in there, and it shows if you've got 10 units, 2 are not paying, and that's how they factor in, your need, I guess, and priority, right?
Yeah, look, yeah, exactly, Ben. So I'm going to apply. I have a declaration form for $22,000 for one unit. I fill out a rent roll for 30 units. They can see all of my rents, and then the response is going to be Crimea River.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that's a great clarification. If you've only got the 10 unit, you're putting in 10 units. If you've got 100 units,
you're putting in
your rent rolls for everything, right?
That's
yeah.
And your request for the funding will be just that rent amount that's owed you to that point and matches to the declaration form.
Yep. Eric states in regards to the 1031, might be very hard to find in the time frame given. Yes, for 1031s, that is absolutely true. We got a couple of things under contract or we got a thing under contract for a guy. Well, actually, we got a contract the day after he identified it, because his time frame was on Monday, and we put it under contract on Tuesday. So that worked out for him. But yeah, it can be tight. But what you've got to do is, this is where I know I keep pushing San Antonio, these new duplexes, but if you're looking anywhere that is new construction, like if you're going to buy out of state somewhere that's new construction, they're not as concerned about the contingency of you needing to sell, because you can't close on it next month anyway, right? So if you write that offer saying, hey, I want to buy your new fourplex here in Utah, and they're like, great, it'll be ready in 6 months, that gives you time to sell your property that needs all the repairs, get it done, and then you can close on yours in the proper time frame. If you're going from something local to something local that is, that is hitting the market, yeah, you're going to have a tough time getting that contingency, that accepted with your contingency of needing to sell. It is possible. It just takes a lot of work, and you got to start crossing properties off your list very early in the game, so you don't end up with something you don't want to close on. But yeah, it's tough. Nicole says vacancy control. Go ahead and clarify what you mean by that. Maybe that's my story on the capping the rents on the vacancies. Maybe if there's something else there, Nicole, go ahead and let me know. A tenant didn't pay for August or September, but moved out. He submitted an email as a promissory notice to repay that rent. Can I send email reminders of payment due by 3/31? And what can a tenant do if they want to extend it to June? Do I have to agree to the extension? No declaration. All right. So you had a tenant missed 2 months, then they moved out. The question is, when can you start collecting on that after they've moved out?
Who asked that question?
That's from Alyssa.
Alyssa?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yep. Alyssa, you're probably not going to like this answer very well, but here it goes. Your debt, the money that's owed you for August and September is owed you. The promissory note means nothing, honestly. in the eviction moratorium language. So that August and September money that is owed you is currently in the grace period. So it's due to you by March 31st. You can't send anything other than a balance reminder statement if you want to. You can send a balance reminder statement that says you owe me this money still. If you do send that balance reminder statement, you must include the House Bill 4401 notice and the House Bill 4401 form. Okay. If you decided to, if you got a declaration form back, that money that you're owed, the grace period is extended to July 1. Okay. And because it happened to a past, or because that debt is owed to you by a past tenant, you're not going to be able to access the landlord compensation fund.
That's a tough answer, but yes.
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. It's a bad spot to be in. They moved out, so you can't collect and you can't do anything or you can't use the landlord compensation fund. And there's not much you can do until the time's up, and then frankly, good luck. I mean,
Yeah, you're in the middle of, you're at the tail end of the grace period for that money. And in fact, you do what's right for you, but I would probably not do anything in terms of notices. I would wait. If that money's not in your hands on April 1, you may want to contact an attorney, but you could file for collections and report it to a credit agency because you've not received a declaration form.
There you go. Alyssa, that answers your other question about when to send to collections. Okay.
Be careful on that declaration form, though. If you get that declaration form, please know everything gets extended through June 30th.
Yep. Nicole, should we send declaration pages to all residents or just those who are late on rent? Just those late on rent.
Yeah. Matter of fact, as Ben said, we initially thought that this building notice says, hey, your landlord's applying for this money. Your rent may be forgiven. I mean, that's what this thing says. Initially, we thought, well, you got to send it to everybody in the building. Like I would have to send that to all 5 units, even though 4 of the units are current.
And I want to clarify something, because you keep saying it as if we made a mistake. But everybody that I talked to,
everybody thought that.
That's what they thought it was, right? So the way that they presented this was, that's right. What you have to do.
Right, and that's we were convinced, but they got enough of a backlash that they added it to their most recent FAQ. It's like, no, you only need to send it to the people that are delinquent.
Yeah. Sheena asks another question here. What other stuff do you predict will develop soon or later on that is going to have an impact on property managers? I think things like that control, a rent cap on turnovers, right? I think that's a possibility. Dan, what are you thinking about?
Oh man, I'm so worn out with all of it. I think there are 2 things. Well, there's one thing for sure. I think that this proposal to end no cause notices to vacate, even in the first year, is going to pass. And I really hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because once you do that, now it's just a step to real San Francisco type rent control.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody the other day that said this person they know moved into a place in San Francisco when they were in college, rented it for 18 years, $2,200 a month. They moved. The owners could not have been more happy, turned around and rented it for $6,000 a month.
That's nuts.
Do that math.
Yeah. Yeah. So
there are implications beyond just, well, what's the big deal? I don't evict in the first year anyway. No. This attempt to not allow you to evict for any reason is the precursor to, in my mind, to stricter, just lowering that amount.
Yep.
To get us to a point where, like, well, the next thing is you can't raise the rent between tenancies.
Right.
So right. People are laughing at me, or you're nuts for doing new construction in Portland. I got 15 years runway.
Yeah.
Even if I had to pay a relocation payment, it still is possible. And We're going to be talking about this in a couple of years, but I think what we'll be talking about is inflation around 3 to 5%, and interest rates around 6.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we talk about the implications of this rent control stuff a lot. Like if you look at San Francisco, those values are through the roof,
Right.
right? But so are the lawsuits, right? So this is what I say. When I say I'm pretty, I think if you own rentals in Portland in 10 years, I think you will be happy in that regard. But you have to be prepared for all of these changes. One of the things that I would say 90% of the calls that I have with landlords, the one piece of advice I give them is get your rents up, right? We don't know when that 7% plus CPI is going to be 5% plus CPI, 4% CPI, CPI, right? Like we don't know when that's going to happen, but you've got to get those rents up to so that when the time comes for you to sell or to refinance or whatever, you have those values there. I love that people love their tenants. Buy them a gift card, buy them a $50 Starbucks gift card and charge them $20 below market rent. That's what you do, right? You don't, there's a guy right now, he's rent should be, it's a duplex, rent should be somewhere around 1550. He's charging like 785. Like that's not going to help you in the next few years at all. It's gonna hurt you pretty significantly, besides the cash flow. Yeah. Anyway, that's my rant. All right. Alyssa's asking for you to narrow your prediction there on interest rates to be at 6%.
And by the way, that's based on nothing. It's just, I believe that the monetary policy and the debt, I just don't see how we're not going to have much higher inflation, and as a result, higher interest rates.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, we got a question here from Randy about opportunity zone properties. I've literally not done anything with opportunity.
I have not. I'm so sorry. I made myself a note the other day to get up to speed on that. And I have, and I'm sorry. I've got so many other things that I'm working on. I'm not your expert there.
All right. Well, that is a great segue for me to talk about the upcoming webinars we've got. Obviously, if you have more questions, feel free to put them in there, but let me get to my slide here on upcoming webinars. This is going to be, so I'm going to send out a survey when we're done here, asking about topics you want to know about. One we've got coming up in March, pets, pandemics, and emotional support animals. We're going to talk about 1031 exchanges coming up. We're just going to go on the basics. The last time we did this, had a huge turnout and a lot of advanced stuff, but I want to get to just the basics of it and how to properly navigate that 1031 exchange. We're going to talk about long distance investing again coming up. Again, less about specific areas and more about how to do it, right? The day-to-day, not whether you're in Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Utah, wherever. If you're here in Oregon, how do you actually own and operate those properties? We're going to talk about commercial financing for those wanting to make the jump from residential finance properties to commercial. But then I also want to know what else you want to know. So if we've got the survey coming out at the end of the webinar, answer the question. There's going to be a question in there about whether you want, if you're thinking of buying or selling, or if you're thinking of hiring property management or changing property managers. And if so, would you like one of us to call you? We don't do a lot of the sales pushing. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to very passively put it into a survey at the end. But it's going to be a busy year. And if you're thinking of doing something in the next, if you're thinking of getting out of town in the next couple of years, I can't dream up a better scenario than this year due to the low inventory and low interest rates, right? And if you're not going to get out of town in the next few years, does it make sense to get to a property manager who can look at your portfolio and tell you what you need to do to optimize that portfolio, whether it's to pass on to your kids or whether it's to trade in something else down the road? having somebody with an investor's view take a look at that is vitally important. So if you'd like to have myself or Dan reach out and give you a call, we'd love to chat with you. That'll be on the survey. And then back to the webinars, it's just throw out ideas. If you've got something you want to learn about, let us know and put it in there. Penalties. All right, real quick, if you send out a past due balance reminder without referencing 4401 in the declaration form, what's the penalty? It's 3 months, right?
Well, yeah, and by the way, you triggered the extension.
You've triggered, yep, there it is. You've triggered the extension automatically by not including that. Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's that. You're very welcome, Christine. So happy to have you on. Will we be doing a class on Senate Bill 330? I would love to. I think it makes more sense to do it once we know that it's passed. But actually, it wouldn't hurt to get something out talking about what it is to inspire you guys to reach out to your, your legislative contacts to support this bill. So
yeah, please do send a note to your state leaders around your support of House Bill 330 and your opposition of, and I can't remember, I just read it today, I don't have it, but whatever this House bill is that would eliminate no cause evictions, like, you can't have that.
Dan, I was actually putting together some stuff just for my own research on 33 or on 330. If you want to send me some info on this no cause eviction thing, we'll send out an email and to everyone in the database, everyone who's attended, to let you guys know where to learn more about it. And then once we get to the point where we need to have a class on it, of course we will have a class on it. Happy to do so. Anything else? Oh, Sheena, I'm going to give you a call about a DST probably tomorrow. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time. This is the first time in 11 months that we've done this that we've ended before 7:30. Good for us. Very excited about it. I think I get to go kiss my kid goodnight. It's going to be awesome. Any other questions, feel free to reach out to Dan and myself. We will send out the replay hopefully tomorrow if I can get all the stars to align. Yeah, if there's anything you need from us, don't hesitate to reach out. Dan, any last words?
Nope. Thank you so much, Ben, for having us tonight. Thanks everybody for attending and taking time out of your evening.
Oh, Ben says he's got 20 more questions, so.
Write them down, Ben. Send them our way.
Yeah. Shoot us an email, Ben. All right. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.
See you later. Bye.